Right, UFC 302 was actually decent. And one thing I've got to say, we say it every week, but the judges need their hard drive getting sorted out. Not only that, what else do they need getting done? They need to get their MRI scan done on the brain, because the stupid decisions happen week in and week out, and nothing happens about it. They're just letting them do what they want. And I'm not going to go into the referee until later in one of the fights. But anyways, it was Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier. Oh my god. I've gotten to the point where I can't call Makhachev boring, because his fights aren't. They're always entertaining. And he's getting to the point where a few more wins and he's going to enter the GOAT debate. Whether you like it or not, whether you're not a fan of him, the way he is beating opponents is convincing. This fight made him look like he was human. But you've got to remember, Dustin Poirier is always going to be a hard matchup for guys like Islam Makhachev. Ones who have got good takedown defense. Not, I'm joking. But that's what he showed in this fight. When I said he's a good matchup, it shouldn't be on paper, but it ended up being like that in the fight until the 5th round. You had some people giving it 2-2 going into that 5th round. I had it 3-1 Makhachev. 4-1 Makhachev, sorry. And it was unfortunate, because I did think that Poirier was growing into the fight, but he just wasn't doing enough, and that's not his fault. I didn't expect him to. He's 35. This will probably be his last fight of his career. And it actually was very impressive, the things he was able to do. I'm sorry I'm not going to be going all in on Makhachev being all excited and happy, because I'm not. I'm just going to be honest with you. But it was like the takedown defense. Poirier's known as a guy who hasn't had the best takedown defense. You look at him against guys like Michael Chandler. As soon as they can get him up against the cage, Poirier just shells up, leaves his body exposed, and then he gets taken down. He listened to the corner. Do not keep your back in the cage. If you don't keep your back in the cage, he was going to struggle to get all these takedowns. The only time he actually got it was when his back was against the cage in the 1st round and was able to do something significant. The other rounds, no. It was just holding the back like he did against Volkanovski, and he didn't have anything. It was just the same sequence on the ground. Him trying to attack the neck by doing a few feints to try and bait Dustin, like try and throw up an armbar to try and make Dustin go to defend that armbar, and then set up the rear naked choke as he's trying to defend it. He was trying to draw him out. But the one thing that I liked from Makhachev that shocked me a lot, it was the finish in the last round, because that is what you call a high IQ move, because most fighters would never be that creative and do that. They would keep trying to force that takedown with that single leg until they can get it. But what does Makhachev do? He goes for the takedown. He's like, right, I'm going to try and get him down. He sees that Poirier's just pushing on the head. He's not letting him get that takedown. So he's like, you know what, F this. Let me just pull my leg, not my leg, his leg, out between of my legs. Not in that type of way. And then just swing his leg round and throw him off balance and then jump onto him due to the momentum. That is high-level wrestling. I can't think of one fighter who's ever been that creative and done something like that. Yeah, we've had some creative wrestling transitions. Arman Tsarukyan's got good transitioning on the ground. But never have I seen something like that where a guy's just swung the leg, jumped onto the back, and then got a dash choke on top of that. That's high-level stuff, and that's why I'm saying each fight with Makhachev, he looks human, but he looks like a guy who he is going to be so hard to beat. And the only guy who I believe actually can stand a chance in lightweight, I'm sorry, but you've got to say, it's Arman Tsarukyan. That's the only guy. Makhachev looks levels above this guy. And Dustin Poirier is one of those guys where, even in the boxing at times, he was hurting Makhachev with light punches, but Makhachev would also catch him. I believe Makhachev was actually outlanding him even on the feet. Even though Poirier, every time he'd land a combination, the crowd would get all excited, making you think he's winning the round. Makhachev was the one actually landing more, and I hate to say it because I wish it wasn't that way, but that's the way it was. And what made it even more impressive for Makhachev is he didn't do what he usually does. Like, I can't think of a moment in that fight. He probably did where he threw a kick. Where were the kicks? I know he had a leg kicker, but he is a kicker to push you in the chest. I'm surprised he weren't using those push kicks to put him at range, because when he's throwing the kicks, what has he got to be scared about by Poirier? Only getting countered. He hasn't got to be scared about Poirier catching that leg and taking him down and getting on top of him, because he ain't going to do that. That's why I found it quite impressive how he was actually able to hold his own, boxing only, against Poirier. Not really mixing up kicks as well like he did against Volkanovski, kicking the wrist and looking to do that. He did not do that at all, and that's why, for me, that was very impressive, to just box with a guy like Poirier and be able to transition and sweep the leg like that after you've been failing takedown attempts over and over and over again and not being able to find the choke. That is a high level. And for Poirier, because he's retiring, I can't even give him an opponent. So for Makhachev, it's got to be Arman Tsarukyan, but I heard that he wants to move up. Fight Leon Edwards. But you've got to do that after you've fought Arman Tsarukyan. But yeah, that was a good performance by both of them. It's not one where I can say one was just dog and the other one wasn't. It wasn't. It was actually a competitive fight when it was on the feet. And you saw Makhachev trying to bring him in with that clinch, putting him into boxing range, where Poirier was able to work those body shots. But that being said, because Makhachev is so strong, he can just bring his head and keep landing that knee, because Poirier, remember, he has to worry about multiple things. He's worrying about getting taken down. So he can't throw his 5-piece combinations like he'd do to a striker, because if he does that, he risks overthrowing and getting taken down off a counter. And not only that, was constantly level changing Poirier, allowing Makhachev to get that read to throw the knee and connect on the chin. So clutch 5th round finish, even though I thought he was winning. You know there would have been controversy about, was Poirier going to win if it went to the 5th round and went to the judges, but it didn't, so it's pretty much irrelevant. But anyways, yeah, that's it. Right, Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa. Seriously. These judges need to be I don't even know what word to use, reassessed. Like, that's why I'm talking about they need an MRI brain scan. How the hell does one person give 4 rounds to Costa and you've got the other judges who have done the complete opposite? Like, sometimes I think they're either not reading the scoring criteria or they're just having like a guess and they're like not paying attention to the fight, because in no world does Costa win 4 rounds. A guy who's mouth breathing, who is backing up, who isn't being that high output until the 4th round, how are you giving all of these rounds? The only rounds where I could say debatable, round 1 and round 4, they are debatable. But even then, in them rounds, he has been outworked. But then you'll say, but remember, damage, which is a fair argument to make. But when you were getting, I'm not going to say knocked down, but he got dropped. Like, he didn't get flattened onto his back, but he kept getting like dropped a few times when he was off balance, Costa, and being put up against the cage and just being walked down, using a lot of energy, gassing out as Sean Strickland teeps as a leg kick. He lands one good kick here and then, which causes swelling on the leg, but he doesn't do anything significant with the boxing. It's just these leg kicks which some land, some get teeped, some get checked. And Strickland was mixing it up, teeping and changing the rhythm to kind of like disrupt Costa, because Costa, he would just stare at Strickland's body the whole fight. It was like he didn't try and attack the head as much as he should have, because he did land a good left hook in one of the rounds. And after he landed that, that was it. He wasn't looking to be any more offensive with it. And that's why I'm saying to you that Costa, for me, ever since that Adesanya fight, he has fell off hard. And Strickland, he has to get that rematch. Like, he even admitted he did it for the fans, he said. Ricky Hatton type of vibes. He'd do it for the fans. But that's irrelevant, because he has to fight Dricka du Plessis. It has to happen next. Paulo Costa, I'm at the point where you just fight the loser of Imavov against Cannonier. We're going to get to the point with Costa, another loss, and he's going to be having to fight an unranked opponent at this rate, because it just don't look good for him, because the power isn't there. he doesn't fight the same as he used to in terms of pressure and looking to be more aggressive. He fights more on the back foot. He's more reserved, and that doesn't suit a guy with that build. The takedowns aren't that great. His takedowns look better on the Ultimate Fighter, but even then, the quality of opposition's obviously going to be weaker. But I'm just saying, Costa, he's given me like Vettori vibes, where they've both fallen off from what you used to think about them. They really have. And Strickland has had like a massive like peak in his career, because I never thought he'd make it to this level where we're talking about him being champion and a high chance of him actually doing it when he fights Du Plessis again. But that being said, I don't know if it's going to happen. Aren't they going to look at doing Adesanya and Du Plessis, even though Adesanya don't deserve it, but because he spent so much time out of the sport? Well, not so much, but he's spending... It'll be coming up... No, not a year. About a good few 7 to 8 months without him being in the cage. And he's going to straight away get that title shot, probably. But Strickland, we all know, deserves it. Even though he is so boring to watch. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. Watching that fight there, it was painful. It is 5 a.m, draining. Like, I could fall asleep watching a Strickland fight. But that doesn't change the fact that he won that fight convincingly. And he should be getting a title shot. But his fights, for me, they're just always so close each round. And there's always a bit of controversy after, but this one shouldn't. Oh, this fight here. I put my predictions on the screen. Kevin Holland versus Michal Oleksiejczuk. Wow. I thought we was looking at a big underdog here win. And I get why I've picked him, because look what happened. He actually got knocked down. And then because Michal Oleksiejczuk, he gets way too excited and looks for the finish like down bad fashion. He ends up getting his A-word submitted and caught in an armbar instead of disengaging and standing Kevin Holland up. Because you could tell Kevin Holland in there, when I was watching him, he is so frustrating to watch when you pick him to win a fight. He really is. As entertaining as he is, like, a fight can drag and he can quit. But anyways, Kevin Holland, for me, he said it himself. He wants to be a gatekeeper. He doesn't care about belts. He just wants the money. Yes, he's got all the athletic ability to become that, but he doesn't have the fight IQ to do it, and he doesn't care. So, who cares? But Michal Oleksiejczuk, it's unfortunate for him because he's actually quite good on the stand-up, but then as soon as it goes down to the ground, he'll get submitted if he comes up against a jiu-jitsu guy. So, the fight I want to see with him next is a Chris Curtis versus Michal Oleksiejczuk. I think that'd be very interesting. Two guys full of power. Chris Curtis is more counter and defensive, whereas Michal Oleksiejczuk's more in your face. That could create a good matchup, and Chris Curtis has got a good chin. But he's got that injury, remember. As soon as he's back from that... I mean, that pulled hamstring, it shouldn't take too long to recover from. He was in the cage with Sean Strickland today and looked fine, but I don't know. But that's the type of fight I want to see next. And, yeah, that's it. And for Kevin Holland, an interesting fight to do with Kevin Holland for me would be a Gregory Rodriguez. I think he deserves more of a step up. Beating guys like Chidi Njokwani, Julian Marquez, Dennis Tululin, Brad Tavares. I think it's about time he has a bit of a step up. Comes up against a Kevin Holland. I think that's the fight to make next for Kevin Holland. I know he's a journeyman, he doesn't really care. But yeah, right, Niko Price versus Alex Morono. So basically a repeat of the first fight happened again. When am I ever going to learn that? Sometimes a guy's just got your number, but it didn't feel like that. Because in the fight here, Morono lost because he had no cardio. I thought Morono, I was about to say, has good cardio. Not really, because that's why I call him a bottle job, because he will start off well in every single fight and then bottle it and then lose the next two, or be winning a fight and then get chinned, or out of nowhere, for example, in this situation, and just look severely gassed, like he's been on a 26 km London marathon. That's how he was acting in there. And you've just got Niko Price, who's got no chin, whose punches had no power, who basically was fighting in there in slow motion like you're fighting in a dream, and just pretty much went out there and basic moves, basic jab, shoot for a double leg, just touching Morono. And no, not in that way. I know he's not that way. Well, to my knowledge anyway. But yeah, that's all he did. And I just can't stand Morono recently. He put some very confusing performances. Like Court McGee, he won it. But it was like he was getting held down, which is fair enough because Court McGee was a good grappler. But he had a neck surgery and he was looking quite poor at moments in the fight. Like another fighter where he has fell off. Niko Price fell off with no chin. And Morono, in my opinion, is starting to fall off. And just, I don't know what's wrong with him. He needs to improve that cardio. Go on more runs. Do more things to improve it. Go on the treadmill. Do something, because change your fight style if it's really that hard. Like just bouncing on the toes every minute, it's not for him at his weight, the way he's built. He's not really lean. He's kind of got that flabby type of build. And he obviously can't cope because he's getting tired after the first round. You're only doing 3 rounds. I can't imagine Morono ever doing a 5-rounder. He would lose because of exhaustion. But anyways, yeah. Randy Brown versus Elizeu Zaleski. This one was one of the weird ones on the card where I was like, Randy Brown, I thought Elizeu Zaleski could pull up the upset. But obviously he couldn't. Randy Brown, he is underrated. I've got to say it at this point. I thought Zaleski was. But Randy Brown, he's very loose on the feet. He was just popping out that jab. He was kicking out of range. And Elizeu Zaleski was struggling because he was level changing. He was doing the overhand, level changing. And all that allowed Randy Brown is to get the read. Every time he goes to level change, if you can catch him with that knee, it's going to do damage because he's going down to level change. And if you're going down, the momentum of him going down whilst Randy Brown's going up into the knee, it's going to cause power. And it's going to cause people to get cut. But one thing that made me a bit suspect, which I still am on Randy Brown, is his chin. Because he has got an ability, well not his chin, his striking defense, because he is very hittable if you can close the distance. I know I said he's got a good jab, and he was light on the feet, but as soon as you close the distance and you land a hard shot at his chin, you kind of see his legs buckle, and that's not the first time I've seen it. And when this happens, he gives away the back a lot. I'm thinking, when we see Randy Brown fight against a guy with good jiu-jitsu, he's going to really struggle. Even though he took the back of Elizeu Zaleski near the end of the fight, of that round, not the end of the fight, that was because of Zaleski losing the position and trying to rush his way back up to the feet, which Randy Brown took advantage of it. But for Randy Brown, I think this is time you get him a ranked opponent. It really is at this point. How many fights does he need to win? And that opponent is Jeff Neal. He called him out after the fight. He was like, oh, he wants to fight Jeff Neal. And I think that'd be a good fight. He's coming off 2 losses. Shavkat and Ian Gary, which are not bad losses. He's looked very inactive on the feet. Apart from the Shavkat fight, the Ian Gary, he fought a very passive way. And against Randy Brown, I think that's actually a good matchup for him because there are times where you can catch him on the chin if you just walk him down and can close the distance and cut off the cage, which Jeff Neal can do. So I think that's the fight to do. And for Elizeu Zaleski, I'm not even joking, the type of fight I can see him getting is a fight with someone like Mike Malott. That would be an interesting fight to see. Because you've got a guy who, both of them can strike. Mike Malott's got the grappling to prevent the takedowns. But that being said, look what Neil Magny did late into the fight. That is a good fight for me to make, in my opinion. That's what I'd like to see next. Right, Roman Kopylov versus César Almeida, the kickboxer who fought Alex Pereira. Kopylov, he probably got bullied in training a lot because, you know, when you're in Russia, well, I've never lived in Russia, but from what I've heard, we all know how good they are at grappling in general. Kopylov was not one of them guys. And after getting bullied by Anthony Hernandez, they have drilled into him, you need to learn how to grapple. And he has finally figured it out. Albert Duraev was able to beat him, wrestling. And now you've got finally Roman Kopylov can grapple. I thought only he could kickbox, but that's not the case anymore. And it seemed like he was a bit scared to strike with Almeida after the first round, because in the first round, he fought a smart fight. And the judges on this again, shambolic. Chris Lee, 28-29 Almeida. I can maybe, and I say maybe, see round 2 because he was actually throwing more than Kopylov, like damaging strikes. And in round 3, he didn't have any space to throw the damaging strikes because he was being taken down. And although Kopylov was doing nothing, if you're holding someone down and they're just on the ground not doing anything either, well then you're obviously going to win the round, whether it looks good or if it doesn't. But I don't think it was a 30-27. I think he won 29-28. But for me, Kopylov, he is still one of the most technical middleweights out there because he was able to drop him through boxing in the first round. We didn't see too many kicks from him because you don't want to go toe-to-toe at range with a proper kickboxer. We saw how good Almeida's kicks were. He was hitting him to the body a lot and he was landing on the leg. So he made the adjustment every time they got close in range to take him down, and it worked. So for Roman Kopylov, I think he now needs to get a push. So the 2 opponents I'd look at giving him is Armen Petrosyan, or if you don't want to do that, give him a Gerald Meerschaert. He's one of those guys you put him up against up-and-comers and he can pull off a madness at times. Not all the time, but he's a one good guy to try against because he will look to grapple. And we noticed that in the fight with Anthony Hernandez, he struggled with a guy who would be in his face with the grappling. But now he's learned to grapple more. I'm hoping that his takedown defense has also improved. So one of those 2 fights there is what I'd look at. But the Armen Petrosyan would probably be the more entertaining. But the more eye-opening one to know where Roman Kopylov is at would be with Gerald Meerschaert. And for his opponent, who do I think he should fight? He's old, so I want him to fight a guy who, he doesn't have to be old, but you've got to give him a decent matchup because he's coming towards the end of his career. I know he's only just joined the UFC, but he is old, and you can see it in the fight because his grappling is non-existent. So, who do I want to see him fight? You might not going to like it, but I do actually want to see him fight Edmen Shahbazyan. I think that would be a good fight because Edmen Shahbazyan, kickboxing focused. The only problem is he actually can grapple a bit. Not to a high level, but he can mix it up. But I believe if César Almeida was getting taken down by Kopylov, there is a chance that Shahbazyan could. But I think Almeida's going to work on that takedown defense. You usually see it with them type of kickboxers who get dominated by grappling in one fight and the next fight they come back and they've improved it significantly. It happened with Kopylov back in the day. It's happening with Alex Pereira, it did back in the day, and he improved. And César Almeida, I believe it will happen with him. I say I believe, not guaranteed, but I hope it does. And Edmen Shahbazyan would be a good fight to put on a card. Because he actually looked quite good on the feet at times. You were seeing that Kopylov was gassing, and César Almeida was still in it. He just couldn't get off the ground, and he was getting bullied. Right, Jailton Almeida versus Alexandr Romanov. Oh my god. I actually thought Romanov would have a chance. I didn't pick him, but I thought he would have a chance, and he goes out there and gets mauled. Again, Jailton Almeida, who's adapting takedowns because there was no front kick into double leg. He actually went for a single, converted it into a body lock, then went for the takedown and got the outside trip. I think it's time for him to fight. I know none of you are going to want to see it, but I think we've got to see him fight Ciryl Gane. Because Ciryl Gane's out there, don't know what he's doing, making movies, God knows what type. But that's the fight I want to see at this point. Because if he beats Ciryl Gane, now he's a title contender. And we know we've got Aspinall and Curtis Blades, but let's just say Curtis Blades loses. We're not going to see Almeida against Blades again, are we? Probably not. Almeida wants to fight towards the title. So maybe, and I say maybe, depending on what happens with, what's his name? Alexander Volkov and Pavlovich, he can fight the winner. And the reason I'm saying that is because that fight might not even happen. And if that fight doesn't happen, I would rather see him fight a Pavlovich than a Ciryl Gane, because I want to see how good is Sergey Pavlovich's takedown defense, which I'm hearing people talk about because of the Sambo background. I would like to see that fight, and that's if the fight doesn't get made. Like, I can't believe that fight is getting made with Volkov. They're literally, I think this is training partners where Volkov's getting bullied by him in sparring, yet they're still making the fight even though he doesn't want to do it. But then you've got Aljamain and you've got Merab, who pretty much might as well be engaged with each other, be allowed not to fight each other. It just don't make any sense. But you must force two other guys to do it. Make it make sense. But anyways, for Jailton Almeida, yep, if Pavlovich ain't going to fight him and it pull out happens, do that. Otherwise, it's got to be Ciryl Gane. Because he can't go any closer to the title. He can't fight John Jones because that just wouldn't happen. It won't get made. John Jones probably would have retired by the time he's in that position. And for Romanov, it's actually really unfortunate for him because Almeida's just one of those freaks where he's just better than him athletically. Maybe his control on the ground, like when he's on the ground, they both look as dominant as each other because Romanov 10-8s people on the ground and so does Almeida. But Almeida clearly was the better grappler. And he's smaller as well, so it's going to be harder to get the takedowns and he's still got it. But I'm trying to think, who could Romanov fight next? Because I don't know if they want to do it, but I want to see it. Sergey Spivak, Romanov. But they're both from the same country, which makes me believe, would they not want to fight each other? I know it doesn't work like that, but when there's like a minority group, do they want to fight each other? I don't know. I don't think they would. But if they do want to do it, make that fight. That's the fight I want to see. Right, Grant Dawson versus Joe Solecki. This was pure bullying. This was men against boys. This was one fight that just probably never should have happened. And because of that, he should get a ranked opponent. He lost to Bobby Green. That was fluky. He was on the feet for way too long. He didn't dive in for the takedown quick enough and bang. Shut out as a lights. And I am still suspect about his chin because a lot of his fights are from him purely dominating his opponent on the ground, not through striking. So, an interesting fight to do would be a Rafael dos Anjos. One where he can be taken down, and look what Vicente Luque did to him. I expect Grant Dawson to do that, but worse. But the only problem is, if he keeps it on the feet way too long, Dos Anjos is the type of guy, although he doesn't have power and he's not really a knockout guy, he could KO a guy like Grant Dawson if they end up standing on the feet striking. But I believe this would be a good matchup for both of them because Dos Anjos doesn't have to worry about the weight of the grappler. It's more of a thing where it will have to be due to skill, like in the Gamrot fight, that was a skill problem. And even then he knocked down Gamrot in that fight. Again, another guy who's striking has looked decent at times, but he also has got a bad chin. He gets dropped in almost every fight. And Grant Dawson, that would be interesting because if he finds that chin early, he could put him out. But if he doesn't, and he allows Grant Dawson to get the takedown, we're going to see a 10-8 round on the ground. Because you don't really see Dos Anjos for any submissions off his backs, usually, if he's on top of you. And even then, a lot of the time, he's going to go to a decision by just holding you on the ground. But yeah. And for Joe Solecki, he's going back to fighting unranked fighters. So Joe Solecki, for me, should fight Clay Guida. A guy who's going to be in his face pressure, which might allow him to get takedowns. But that being said, even if you try and take him down, he's quite easy to submit. So I think that'd be an interesting fight. Clay Guida's on his way out. He'll probably take this fight because he doesn't really care. He'll make money from it. Right, Jake Matthews versus Phil Rowe. In my opinion, I'm going to repeat it again. As much as you might like Phil Rowe, to me he is a fraud. Not just because of how his record looks, 10-5, because you look at Jalen Turner's record and think he's woeful. He's not. But Phil Rowe, to me, he really is. He's got all the, what word can I use? The limbs. He's got the athletic frame, the height, to be way better than he is. A bit like Kevin Holland's got all of those features. Plus, he knows how to grapple. But he just doesn't make the right decisions in the fight. He started off well against Jake Matthews, and some people actually think he won, I believe. Or maybe it was just the commentary team which was making me think that other people thought that, which they probably didn't, because his only good win's Niko Price, and in that fight he wasn't even doing too well until Niko Price started to gas out. And that's what I'm telling you. Phil Rowe's one of those guys where he is a fraud. I'm sorry. Beating Jason Witt and beating Orion Kosuke, they don't look impressive. And I know you've got to beat someone to build up your ranking, but in them fights as well, Orion Kosuke gassed out, he won. Jason Witt, old man, pensioner, OAP. I expect you to win that. Otherwise, what are you doing in the UFC? Phil Rowe, if he had won the fight, I'd like to see him have a fight with Randy Brown, but he did not win. So, an interesting fight that we could do with Phil Rowe is Nursultan Rusbiev. Phil Rowe wasn't establishing like that jab and that kick like he did more of in the first round. And because of that, that will become a problem against a guy like Zaleski, who will constantly try and get in your face, level change. And if you're not throwing enough of those kicks and you only do it in the first round, it ain't going to work. Nursultan Rusbiev would be more interesting because I think he's got a force of grappling in that type of fight. We saw Buckley do it, but just because Buckley did it don't mean Rowe can do it. But I think in that type of fight, the striking, he can match the frame of a Rusbiev. So he can't just go out there and just bully him. But that is if he wants to fight at welterweight. And I think he'll probably move up because his last fight didn't really work out too well. And he probably doesn't like the weight cut. Right, Bassil Hafez versus Gall. Right, this fight should have got fight of the night. But I know what Dana White was thinking. Don't give it to a guy in the prelims unless you really stand out. Because if you keep saying that your main event is fight of the night, it's going to make people more interested to watch your fight compared to saying that the prelim was great. Because that's not going to encourage people to buy the pay-per-view because the prelim was great. But if one of the main card fights was great, that's going to encourage a fan or someone even more to buy it. So by him giving them the bonus, when people are checking who got the bonus and they're seeing that it's on the main card, it'll make them more inclined to buy it. So Bassil Hafez, for me, that performance did not look good because he was getting too confident. And in the first round, he looked good. That was comfortable. He was walking him down, looking to land the overhands, but he does struggle a little bit with range management. And we saw that in the second round because I would not argue if there was a 29-28 goal, I would have not have complained because Hafez seemed to have gassed out. And you look at that fight of Madalena, he looked so much better in there. And it just shows you why. If you look at his record, I can kind of see why. He actually doesn't have that much power because he looks like he hits hard when it connects, but he doesn't really drop people. And yes, he hurt Gall at times, but I believe Gall hurt him, and I don't think the UFC will call it a knockdown, but to me that's a knockdown when he dropped him with that not right hand. That. Never mind, it wasn't actually a knockdown, but it was a near knockdown. When he got hit with that cross, and you see Hafez's body like start falling backwards and then he spins out. I'm a bit worried about Hafez in terms of how he was a heavy favourite. But it made sense. But when you actually watch that fight back, it's weird to think that because there was an argument for Gall winning that, even though I don't think he did. Hafez is very tense out there. He headhunts against a guy who can work the body very well. He will get stopped because his cardio looked a bit sus, even in the third round. Even in the second round, Gall was gaining momentum, but in that third round, I'm sorry, Gall won that. But rounds 1 and 2, Hafez. So, who do I want to see Hafez fight next? I want him to fight Jeremiah Wells. That could be a fight of the night candidate because Jeremiah Wells jumps into range. He's very heavy hook-handed and swings. He's a hooker. And that could be dangerous because both of them down the pocket, I'm telling you, that is a fight of the year contender. Both of them swinging, both headhunting. Jeremiah Wells can shoot for good takedowns and actually get them with the jiu-jitsu, whereas Bassil Hafez, again, we haven't really seen him get a jiu-jitsu finish, but we know he can do it. But I think that fight there is a stand-up fight where Jeremiah Wells is going to blast him, blitz into range, then look for the takedowns, and I can see them getting a bit tired in about the third round, and then both swinging in the pocket, like we saw with Gall and Bassil Hafez. The Max Holloway effect is there for a lot of fighters now with 10 seconds left on the clock. They like to do what Max Holloway did by swinging down, and I think that's the fight to make. For Gall, it's kind of weird because his record looks really bad now, and it's about picking the right fight to get him back on track. So, one opponent I actually think he could actually do decent with in boxing, and you're not going to like who I'm going to say here. I really do think we should give him Niko Price. Niko Price just won this fight here, but if you actually go back and watch the fight, he won due to exhaustion of his opponent. He didn't outstrike him just because they were both at full cardio and he was just better than him. No. Morono was winning the first round and then gasses out and then bottles the fight. Right, André Lima versus Mitch Raposo. That fight was pretty much bullying. Leg kick galore. That's all he had to do. He had to stay out of range, leg kick, force Mitch Raposo to try and jump in, circle out, leg kick. And he really, really struggled. So for André Lima, I honestly think the type of fight you want to see him fight next is a Charles Johnson. And I've not picked Jafel Filho because I believe he needs to get a step up, like probably a ranked opponent. But if he can beat Charles Johnson, now you're looking at getting a ranked opponent. And in flyweight, you can get ranked opponents so fast if you're new. You just have to put in very good performances early because the division is so small. And I believe if you can beat Charles Johnson, who he pulls off some weird wins, is a very entertaining fighter to have on the roster, like beating Azat Maxim after losing the first round. I believe he got dropped in the first round, and then beating Jake Hadley after losing in the first round. They are two good wins to have on your record. And this André Lima was a kickboxer. It's not a thing of where he's just some random bum from some random promotion. He actually has a kickboxing background, so I want to see him fight Charles Johnson. And knowing him, he'll probably take that fight. But just don't give him an Ode Osbourne because that would just be like feeding the lamb to the slaughter. He will win that fight with ease. And if he wins the next fight comfortably or does it in any good fashion, you should start looking at ranked opponents because if you actually look back at Steve Elsig, I remember his first fight against David Dorak. They gave him that fight against a ranked opponent on his debut because they realised that he actually looked quite good. So I think they can do something similar here, but after he beats one more opponent. So yeah. For Mitch Raposo, he's in a situation where he lost on the Contender. He now lost when he got a chance in the UFC. I think he'll be given one more chance. If he fails, he is out. Not my choice, Dana White's. Felipe Dos Santos against Mitch Raposo. I think that would be a really interesting fight because Mitch Raposo, I don't think he'll struggle to get the takedowns because I've seen from Felipe Dos Santos, he's not that hard to get down. The only thing you have to worry about is he's annoying on the ground. One of those fighters who, Tony Ferguson style, digging in elbows into your face, pushing you in your face on the ground, making it uncomfortable, throwing up chokes. But I think Mitch Raposo being strong, he could actually win a fight against Felipe Dos Santos because he can get the takedowns. His boxing's crisp. And when you saw the boxing of Felipe Dos Santos against Manel Cap, he got clipped in the pocket with crosses quite a few times. Even though he actually looked quite sharp in that, he did actually but he actually hit Manel Cap on the chin flush a good amount of times. But I think against Mitch Raposo, the problem wasn't the boxing, it was the leg kick slowing him down. And I don't think Felipe Dos Santos can throw them to that level. He can throw them well, but he hasn't got kickboxing to the degree of Lima, who was a champion in it. So, no. But I think Mitch Raposo can mix up the grappling as well, and he actually could win that fight. So, I don't think he's that bad. I just think he's been given hard fights early. So, yeah. That's it. The card was decent. So, thank you for watching. Talk to you soon.